everyone for attending. This is Masters of the List Formatting Universe, Advanced List Formatting. We're going to briefly go over some basic understanding and context of list formatting, but we're going to dive pretty deep immediately into the pool and show you some of the advanced features you can use. So we've got a jam-packed 50-minute session today. Just to go over some of the basic slides, we want to join M365 Chicago in supporting the public school system through Children First Fund. Always a great initiative. You could utilize that QR code or the URL there to donate. Of course, they'd like to know feedback, areas of improvement that you might want to take advantage of or provide feedback on. So definitely provide that information. And as Ed had mentioned, we definitely want to thank all of our sponsors, Gold, Silver, and community partners. Even though there's a lot of virtual events going on, these are all still time and money to put them on. So we appreciate that. And of course, who doesn't like free stuff, raffles and giveaways? So submit your raffle entry to the URL that's below there. I'm sure you've seen that a lot today, but some really cool raffles and giveaways. Definitely take advantage of that. Someone's going to get an Xbox One, so that's pretty slick. All right, my name is David Warner. I am a Microsoft MVP PNP team member, Catapult Systems employee. As you can see on the screen, as well as the real background behind me, I'm a big, huge sports fan, but an even bigger fan of the community. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, want to collaborate, want to chat, want to get more involved in the community. Myself and April are both big fans, and so you can reach me at David Warner II or my email address, david@warner.digital. Don't ever hesitate. Would love to collaborate with you. Unable to do this session today without her. She is the awesome April Dunnam. April?
Thanks, David. Yeah, hey everyone. My name is April Dunnam. I lead the Power Platform advocacy team at Microsoft. But besides Power Platform, I also love SharePoint. That's my background in SharePoint list formatting. I'm also a member of the PNP team. So if you have any questions at all, anything I can help with, don't hesitate to reach out as well. You can find me on Twitter at April Dunnam, or I also have a YouTube channel with how-to videos, and then I answer comments on there as well. It's another way to reach me.
Awesome. Thanks, April. Let's take a look at our agenda for today. So Masters of the Universe, obviously, this is a play on He-Man. We've got Parker designs in store for you in the future, but we started with some Funko Pops, as April and I are big fans of, as you can see in her real background as well. We're going to just briefly go over some of the out-of-the-box SharePoint list features and an overview of list formatting. And then we're going to dive into some of the more advanced stuff. If you were in the last session with Nora, as you saw that he had mentioned form formatting. And then we're going to get into a lot more of the outer rim of list formatting, how you can take advantage of things like dynamic filtering, integrating Power Automate, converting HTML to JSON. Maybe you're not comfortable with that whole JSON guy. You're not sure, it seems kind of shady, but you're comfortable with HTML, right? And you'd like to see how you can maybe write some of that and automatically convert it for use in list formatting. We'll see how to integrate PowerApps, and then perhaps you're more of the pro dev side. You really love getting into VS Code and writing code, and so you'd like to see how to integrate that solution. Even if you're not, it's a good seamless way to start building some of that JSON and see it immediately within your browser. So we'll cover all those features together today. So let's start with just a brief list formatting overview. We've got three varieties of list formatting. The first two are the most, I would say, tenured. Column formatting, it lets you control the individual column within your list. We all know what lists are. They're tried and true. We've been working with them for years. Column formatting is focused directly on an individual column of data, right? So you can style it. You can control the content of the column. And when I say content, I mean like presentation layer. You're not necessarily going to change what the actual content of the column is, but from the presentation layer, you're able to refine and define exactly what's going to show up visually for your users. And to some degree, you can inject functionality into there. So where no anchor tag or hyperlink exists, you can create one, some things like that. View formatting, as we see here in the middle, that is where you're going to construct the entire look and feel of your entire row, right? So when you think of a list, you've got rows of data, and you're able to change the individual row for the entire collection of columns. Now, because there are multiple views associated to a single list, you can, of course, update and change each view. So that gives you some depth. Column, there's only ever one column for a specific column of data. You change the formatting for that, it's associated to that column perpetually. But because there are multiple views within a list, each view can have its own formatting assigned to it. And then, of course, the newest on the block is form formatting. actually going to start out with a demo on that because that is new and exciting, and one of the areas that could use a lot of improvement, usually from the UI perspective, when your content contributors and authors are putting data into your lists and libraries. So again, all of these allow styling, the content of the header and footer and the body for the form formatting, the functionality to some degree, and the content of the columns or the rows with the column and form, view formatting. So what does all this look like though in actuality? Well, there is an out-of-the-box list experience, right? Basic. There is column formatting. So we've taken that Twitter information that we see right there and replaced it with something a little bit more visually appealing. Now, we didn't change the actual content in the column. It still says the Chris Kent, even though it shows his picture, still says Bo Cameron, even though it shows his picture. We're just changing the presentation layer, right? And it's associated to the individual column. And then from a view formatting perspective, you can see here we're overwriting the entire landscape of the entire row. So we still have the information we're using, the name, you can see that being derived by that, the name there, the label here. And then because there are areas where we may have location, well, now we're actually calling out to like a pseudo API there to be able to display a live map of a general location, right? So a lot of control there that can be done. But this is all pretty basic list formatting stuff, and setting the context for it is important so you know what you're capable of. Maybe you're new to list formatting. Let's dive into the more exciting, newer opportunities or advanced opportunities to take a look at what we can do. So to do that, we're going to start with form formatting, and we're going to hand that over to April.
Awesome. Thanks, David. So form formatting, let's talk about the different options that we have first with this. So as David briefly mentioned there, we have a few different things that we can do with form formatting, and I'm going to go kind of step by step on and build upon what we can do. So first, let's take a look at a new form inside of SharePoint and just see what it looks like. So when we're looking at this form, for example, for asset management, we see that we have a lot of different pieces of data here, and we have to kind of scroll throughout the form to fill out all the data and see what we actually need to fill out here. So if possible, from just a user experience standpoint, we probably want to reduce the amount of scrolling that a user has to do when they're filling out a form. So it would be really great if we could say maybe group this data in different sections, and maybe we could have a multi-column layout rather than what we see out of the box. So this is something that if we wanted to do this before we had form formatting, would take quite a bit of work, or might not even have been really possible to do. But now, thanks to form formatting, we can do that in addition to manipulating the header and the footer of the form. So right now, the standard header that we get just shows what this is. This is a new item form or the edit item form or display, and we don't really have a header in this instance. So with form formatting, we can customize the body, and we can also add and inject headers and footers into our forms. So to do this, I had just clicked on the new item, like I was going to add a new item into my form. When I do that, you'll see that we have this option in the upper right-hand corner where we can either edit columns or we can configure the layout. So if I go to configure layout, this is where we can actually go in and apply some of this form formatting using JSON, which David mentioned earlier, to manipulate how the data is displayed. So going on behind the scenes, if you haven't really looked at list formatting before, we're using JSON to manipulate the UI. So nothing's really changing in the back end of anything we do. It's just manipulating what's shown here in the UI for the end user on the front end. So when we take a look at what's going on here with the form formatting, the first thing we need to look at is what we want to apply the formatting to. So here are those three options I just mentioned: the header, the body, and the footer. So you'll select where you're wanting to apply the formatting. So we might start off, say, with the body. So we can maybe do that multi-column grouped layout like I was mentioning earlier for this data. And then below is where we're going to paste in some JSON. Now I'm going to switch over here to VS Code, and we'll take a look at some JSON that we have here. So I have this form body JSON, and really when we break it down with simplicity wise, all we have to do is first identify the sections that we want to group our data into in this instance. So you'll see that that's what I'm doing here. I have this sections tag, and I'm going to identify a few key. I think I have 4 different sections in this case. So I want a section for the key information. I want some details. I want to identify the owners of this particular asset and the status. So those are the section of defined, and within those sections, we're just going to use another property called fields, and we're going to just paste in the display names of the individual fields in this Microsoft list, SharePoint list, that I want to have inside the section. So that's what I went through and I did here. I have the info and I have information like the asset tag, manufacturer, serial number, and all that level of details in the details section, and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to copy this, and to actually use this inside of my list, all I have to do is copy that JSON, and I'll paste that here into the block that we have on the right-hand panel for the formatting code. So I've selected to apply that to the body, so I'm going to click Save, and I'm going to close out of this and just kind of refresh my screen here. And now if I go back into a new item, you see that that screen is taking up way more real estate. So rather than that really small panel on the right-hand side, it's kind of taking up almost the full real estate of my screen. And I have a 4-column layout with these different header sections here. So I have info, details, owners and status, and all my information is displayed there. So great way to customize your form, something that traditionally, again, before this form formatting capability, you might have, say, turned to something like PowerApps just to get a simple 4-column layout like this. Now no longer necessary thanks to form formatting. We'll take a quick look too at the other options we have, like being able to put in a header. Now the header concept is very interesting because we can do things like being able to dynamically tell what mode the form is. So maybe if it's a new form, I don't really care about having a header in there because I haven't entered, I don't have any details about the item yet. But if it's a display or an edit form, I probably want to have some custom information at the top where I can see the key pieces of info that I want to surface up to the user. So this is showing how we can do that with some form formatting. So we can do things like I can do some styling where I can get the status. So it's all really just Excel-like expressions that we're using for some of this functionality for like the class here. I want to have a different class based off of what the status is. So if the status is available, I want a class that's going to have a background color of green. If the status is in use, I want it to have this blue background and so on and so forth. So if we scroll down a little bit on this sample, we see where I'm pulling in additional information from that list, like the model number and the asset type, the title, manufacturer. And another thing that I'm doing here, we can make the formatting interactive. So rather than just changing how the data is displayed, I can actually change what's going on and make a hyperlink in this case. So you see I have an href tag here, an A tag, and I'm doing a mail to, and I'm getting information about the item here, like the model number and the order number, passing that into the subject and the body. And I'm sending an email to the owner of this item to ask some information about it. So that's mostly the big things that I'm doing here. Due dates, doing some comparison there to see some math if it's less than or equal than today, and I'm going to show a warning if so. So let's just take a look at what a header can look like in practice here, and we'll go and apply this back to our list in the header section, and we're going to click Save. Now again, nothing's happening right now in the new item because this is only going to apply to a existing item. So if I click on, say, this, let's click on Clippy because that's fun. Everyone either loves or hates Clippy here. So now when I click on Clippy, you see we have this header with the background color. I have a link to email, which would open up the Outlook. And then I can see the picture kind of front and center of what the asset is. So a good example of the header. And lastly, body or the footer is pretty much very similar. A use case that we might have for this, where would you want to put a footer, is maybe you want a shoot an email if there's a question about the item, right? So this sample is very simple. We might just, in this case, maybe you want to start a Teams chat. So if we have a question about this particular item, you see I'm just using a shortcut here to pass in the email of the user that owns this item, and that will open up a Teams chat. So if we go back here, we can apply that to the footer, click Save. And now if we scroll down, you see that one kind of applied immediately here at the bottom, right above the Save and the Cancel buttons. I have a footer that I've just injected there, all with this form formatting capability. So pretty cool stuff that we can do here. Only other thing that I want to show really quick, you might be wondering, well, how can I dynamically maybe show and hide fields in this particular example? So to show that, I'm going to switch over real quick to a different list. And if we click New on this list, You might notice that this is a really common example that we run into, right? We have country in this case. So if I choose United States, I shouldn't have to show state and province all the time when I'm entering a new piece of information here, because state should show if I choose US, and then province should show if I choose Canada. This is a very common requirement where it's really a pain to do. Before form formatting, we had to probably again turn to PowerApps just to have this simple conditional formatting to dynamically show or hide that field. Now with form formatting, you might have noticed when I clicked on that little icon in the upper right-hand corner, we also have this option to edit columns. And we can not only, hide and show by unchecking and checking an item, but you'll see that we have these 3 dots next to an item, and we have an edit conditional formula. So if I click that, now we get a text box where I can paste in a conditional formula into that box so that I can do some of that conditional logic there to dynamically show or hide an item. So I just put in this very simple Excel-like formula where I'm saying if the country equals Canada, set the visibility to true, otherwise set the visibility to false. And if I click save on that, you see that field goes gray, letting me know that I have some conditional logic and formatting applied. And I can go do the exact same thing here with the United States. So just same formula, just changing the data from Canada to US. And click save up here at the top there just to apply those changes. And now if you see when I click new, let's show you, just got to refresh the page real quick. There we go. Now those 2 fields aren't even there. So now I have to actually click the country that I want, and then the corresponding field shows below. So another use case of what we can do here with form formatting. So now I'm going to turn it back over to David, and he's going to talk about taking it further and specifically what we can do with some dynamic filtering.
Awesome. Thank you, April. And as she mentioned, we're going to dive directly into the demos for each of these next subsequent sections. So dynamic filtering. Now, as you may or may not know, the lists web part, which is out of the box, as you can see here, I'm on a page, dynamicfiltering.spx, and I've simply just loaded a web part, list web part. And this is out of the box web part from Microsoft, and it just allows us to point at the individual lists that we want to utilize. So we're using social profiles, but it also allows us to utilize the dynamic filtering. And because the list web part inherits the ability to show list formatting, then we can make these work together in sort of almost a rapid dashboarding kind of experience, which is pretty slick, right? So we're gonna see what that looks like. So the first thing we want is we want our list to look a little bit better. In this case, we're using social profiles. What we really like to do is just see a picture of the Twitter profile. So we're gonna use column formatting for that, and I'm not going to dwell too much on the code that makes that happen, but I'm going to go over to the list where that exists. I'm going to select the Twitter and format that column. I'm going to go straight to advanced and paste in our format, right? So now we see that picture. So that's associated to the column. I've saved it. Everything's good to go. So if I come back here, I'm just going to republish that page. And now you see as I've refreshed, it's showing that. Now, ideally, we don't want to necessarily see the title and the picture. Maybe we want to condense that down. Well, that's where we can actually select just another view, right? So I've got another view where the only thing that's showing up is the actual Twitter picture. So we're kind of now starting to condense. That's great. But what if we wanted to show that view of the larger information about an individual contributor here? Well, that's where the dynamic filtering comes in. So I'm going to re-edit my page. I'm going to come and I'm gonna add a web part, and I'm just gonna use the list. Remember, this is an out of the box. I'm going to select the view formatting social profiles. We've already pre-formatted it because we've applied that. Again, it's this formatting that is available for free. We'll give you some of those resources later. But the key is I'm going to edit this web part, and I'm going to focus on this dynamic filtering area. So I'm going to turn it on. And the first thing it asks me for is what column in this web part, essentially it's looking for that TF4VF, right? So view formatting, social profiles, do I want to filter, right? So the idea here is that I would love to be able to select this. I'll go back to my Twitter pick only, right? And I would love to be able to just select one of these and have this list filter over here. Right, so how could I do that? Well, I'm going to go back to this web part again. I'm going to turn dynamic filtering on, and the the column that they have in common are, of course, the Twitter. So I'm going to select Twitter. That's how I'd like to filter. I want to filter this based on Twitter. Then it says, what is the list or library containing the filter value? Because remember, these are two different lists, right? This is one list and this is another list. So do they have commonalities between them? Yes, they do. So I'm going to select that, and you'll notice that it shows up because it's on the page. It shows up in my dropdown. Now, when I've selected that, another selection box opens up saying, well, what is the filter value? So essentially we're saying, what's the common filter value that these two lists should have in common that I could use to filter on? So in this case, it's got a bunch of things, but we know it's Twitter. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to hit apply. And now I'm going to close this. I'm going to republish. So what happens is when, and again, I can hide all this stuff up here too. I'm leaving it open for now, just because I want to be able to kind of show you. But you could always hide these things and hide the see all. That's a newer-ish feature, which is pretty cool. So it really creates a sense of dashboarding. But now because I have nothing selected over here, it's showing me everything in this list, right? But watch as I then go in and select Chris. Now it's filtered out that web part to only show Chris. Or if I want to see Bo and Chris, then I can do that. And as you can see, you can follow along the trail there. I can click, and these are two different web parts, two different lists, but I'm using one to filter the other. Right? And so because we can hide all this information as well if we wanted to, then we can start to get it a little closer to that dashboarding experience. So I'll come in and I'll say for the view, I do want to go Twitter pick only, so I'll force that. I'm going to hide all of that, right? Hit apply on that. The same is going to be done over here. I'm going to come over, I'm going to hide and apply, and I'm going to republish. And so now we've got the titles showing up, but we've got none of the other Chrome, which is nice. And so it kind of feels like now we're able to provide, again, you can't override every little thing, right? But we still are able to now provide sort of a filtering mechanism in this dashboarding-like experience. And this is 100% out of the box. We're not doing anything here that is unavailable to anyone else using any special extensions or web parts. These are completely out-of-the-box web parts that are available to you by Microsoft. But that dynamic filtering, again, allows us to connect two different lists in two different web parts together to provide that level of filtering that we want, right? And now think about it. We could take this a little further, and perhaps we could utilize that country designation. So we want to see everyone in the US versus Canada. And so now we could set it up in a way that's a little bit more advanced than even this, where we're just comparing person to person for filtering. But we absolutely could set our view here to show the countries available, but then still tie them together by what makes sense for the filter. So we could say, hey, we want to see everyone in the US by selecting United States, or we want to see everyone in Canada by selecting Canada, and then show all of them there. So again, multiple layers of usefulness and functionality here, not just as simple as we've implemented here, but again, the opportunity is there. So we're just ramping up here on different opportunities. And so this is one that we wanted to share at the outset. Now I'm going to hand it back over to April, and we're going to talk a little bit about Power Automate.
Awesome, thanks. This is one of my favorite subjects here. So being a Power Platform person is how we can integrate the Power Platform with list formatting. So we're going to start with Power Automate. And this is probably one of the first things I honestly did with column formatting here, is see how I can integrate it with the flow. Let's talk about the use case first. So here I have an event itinerary list that I use one of the Microsoft List templates for. And one of the things that I'm trying to do with this list is how can I easily send a reminder about a session coming up to the people that are registered for it? So wouldn't it be cool if I could just maybe click on a column in here and just have that execute a flow, which will go through and find out who's registered for the event and send out that reminder? Now, you might be wondering if you've ever integrated Power Automate like a flow with a SharePoint list before, well, why do we really need to do that when you can say click on the item and you can click on the Automate button and you can see the different flows that you have here and then click on that to execute? Well, the main reason is what you just saw there. I had to do about 3 different clicks just to even get to the flow to start it, plus an additional click to run. So we're at 4 clicks at this point. So that's one issue. And then beyond that, how does a user casually going to this list even know that that flow is a thing to set a reminder, because users might not even think to click on the automate button to see what is even an option there. So it would be really great if we can make it front and center that there is an option to send a reminder. So that's what we can do with column formatting. Now, first thing before I get into the JSON to actually do this in the column formatting, let's take a look at the flow just so we can see what's going on really quick. So I'm going to go over to Power Automate, and you'll see that I have this event reminder flow. So a key thing to be able to integrate a flow like this, what I'm showing with the SharePoint list, is the trigger. So if we take a look and we put this in edit mode here, you'll notice that the trigger that I'm using for this is for selected item. This is what enables me, if we go back to the list, to be able to click on an item like this and be able to see the flow as an option under the Automate tab. So in order to execute the flow this way, we need to use this particular trigger, which is the for selected item. There's actually two different ones. So it depends on if you're using this in a SharePoint list like I am right now, or a SharePoint library. So for a library, there's a different trigger called for selected file. So choose one of those options if you want to do what I'm about to show. And all you have to do is point it to the SharePoint list or library, depending on what you're doing, that you want to execute this from. And another cool thing about these, I'm not going to show this in this particular demo, but you notice we have these inputs. So if you want to collect information from the user before they actually run the flow, we can take and pass in inputs into our flow. So another capability here. So all I'm doing after this workflow is triggered is I'm going and I'm getting the item that you want to trigger this on. And I'm actually, in this case, just going to send an email. So I might send an email blast out to the whole company, letting them know, hey, coming up tomorrow, be sure to check out this event, right? So pretty simple. And then finally, the other key piece to this is I'm updating the item which I triggered this from. So I want to update the reminder column, which I'm going to be applying this column formatting to have the text sent. Because if the reminder has already been sent, I don't want to send it again. So I want to make sure that the user knows if they need to send a reminder or if it's already been sent. So very, very simple flow. But how do we integrate this with column formatting? Well, we're going to go back to VS Code real quick, and we're going to open up this example here as column formatting flow. So let me close out of that. Okay. Now, really, it's a very straightforward flow that you can copy and paste and reuse, but there's a few things that we can customize. And the main thing to know is this section here, which is the action params. In this section, after the ID, you'll see this, we have this GUID in here. So what this ties to is the GUID of the flow that you want to execute when you click the button. So if I go back to flow, I'm going to show you how we can find that GUID. So right now I have the flow open, this event reminder flow, and you'll see that we have two different GUIDs in here. So you want to make sure that you're getting the right one. This in the URL here, we have environments, and then we have default in this GUID. That is the GUID of the environment for the Power Platform. We don't want that. We want the GUID that is after this WAC flows / this one. So you're going to copy that GUID from your URL path, and that's what we're going to use here in our JSON to apply this column formatting. So we're going to go back here and you'll paste that in there. And then the only other things are what I did to customize this is check on that reminder status. So if it's sent, I want to have a color of green. Otherwise, if I need to send a reminder and want to make that actionable, I'm going to have it red. And then I'm just adding in an icon at this point. So again, if it's sent, I want to have a check mark letting me know that I've sent this. And if it's not sent, I want to send a little clock icon to let me know that I can send a reminder. So that's pretty much it for the sample. And again, all we need to know is whatever the GUID of the flow that you want to execute, and make sure you have the right trigger, and then we can make this happen. So let's copy and paste, and we'll see this in action and why this is a really cool use case for column formatting. So I'm going to go back to my list, and we're going to go, and this is the column that I'm going to use for this example. It can be any column you want, any column type, but for this, I'm just using a simple single line of text column called reminder. So we're going to click on the dropdown for the column. We're going to go to column settings and format this column. And I'm going to go to advanced mode here on the bottom left-hand corner of the pop-up. And I'm going to paste in that sample that we have and click save. And now you see, as soon as I do that, this column at the top had the sent text in there. So it's automatically noticing that I have the text is green and I have a green check mark letting me know that I've already sent out the reminder email. But this one below, my intro to Dataverse routine session, doesn't have that, so I can actually send a reminder. So now directly from this column, I can click on that. And rather than having to do the 4 clicks that you saw earlier, where I had to select the item first, I had to go to automate, I had to find the flow and all that, I click it one time and I just say, run flow, go do your thing. And it's gonna go kick out the process and it's gonna execute my flow. So I can see I even get a notice that it was done, and I can go to flow just to verify that it was sent. So I can go to my event reminder flow and look at the run history. I see 2 seconds ago it succeeded, and I can even open up my email here real quick since I sent an email to myself, and you can see the event reminder that I get with the title, the code, and the duration and the description of the session. So that's a great example of how we can integrate Power Automates with our column formatting. And there's even more that you can do if you go to the PNP sample browser for list formatting, which we'll share a little bit later. There's different samples of how we can dynamically run different flows. So we can modify the JSON really quick and do like an if statement to say, okay, well, if maybe the value is sent, I want to do this flow and so on and so forth, and really have this execute multiple different flows based off of some conditional logic that we have added here into the JSON. So lots of options and things that we can do with this Power Automate integration. And with that, so that's a simple example of that. Now David's going to show us how we can convert HTML to JSON with some tooling that we have.
Awesome, thank you. That is super, super cool. I love the integration of Power Automate and list formatting. It just brings together the whole landscape of Microsoft 365. All right, well, maybe you are comfortable with HTML, but JSON is still a little foreign to you. You're just getting used to it. You want to learn more, but you're a little more streamlined in writing HTML. There is a tool called HTML to Formatter that is available to you that you can take advantage of. Now, I don't have access to the chat, and I don't know how many of you do. I sent the link to April, and she'll share it in the chat. But if you just simply Google list formatting, HTML to Formatter, you'll find it right here. It's part of the PNP repository for list formatting, so it is there as well, and you could always get access. It's pretty easy to find if you can. But it's this interface here that's really, really slick, and it allows you to do things like write HTML and CSS, and then have it automatically converted into JSON that you can then just copy and paste directly into your list. So how does it all work? Well, let's take a look. The first thing we want to do is understand the context of what we're going to try to achieve. We're going to try to write the column formatting definition here for our Twitter, right? So we know that what that looked like was that we got to do some rounded corners, radiuses to make it all like a nice little circle. We need to make a call out to some images. So we see there's a lot going on here, not a ton, 38 lines of JSON, but we know it could get more complex. We know that with view formatting, you can get much higher, but it might be easier to create this in HTML at first, right? So we're going to do that. So I'm going to delete everything here so we can prove that it does work. I'm going to save that. We see it's back to normal. And so we know that initially we're probably going to start out with an image, right? We're ideally thinking it's going to be an image that we want to create at first. So I'm going to copy. I've got a bunch of snippets over here off screen, but you'll see them sequentially as we go through here. I'm going to paste it. And what I'm essentially doing is I'm just using some local locations on my website for the images. And I'm just saying I want to see an image, and I'm pointing at Chris's Twitter profile. Now I could point at Twitter, but for purposes of this, I'm just keeping it simple. And this is just an image tag. Now I've hard coded that image location, right? So what you want to do once you've written the HTML is I'm going to hit run, and it even gives you a cool little preview. And it shows us the schema that's been created for us. And we see that what it's done is it's taken the fact that that's an element type of image, what the SRC or the location is for it is an attribute. And so at this point, technically, I can copy that if I want to by clicking the little copy button. And I can come over here and I can paste that in and I can preview. Well, of course, I hard-coded Chris, right? So everybody's going to get Chris pictures. We all need more Chris. Who doesn't want more Chris? But we want it to be a little more accurate than that, right? So the reason I started out with a hard-coded HTML or hard-coded image is because it helps me see the preview of that, right? I can know exactly what I'm writing the entire time. As I add more CSS, I can actually see a preview. Because ideally what you're going to do in your list formatting is you're going to reference the fields dynamically. And what does that look like? Well, if I come in here and replace that current field is actually what we would use as the location. So I'm setting that up as kind of a dynamic thing. But when I hit run, what happens? Well, I hit run, and because it doesn't really know what to point at, here, this is abstracted from my list, I get a broken image. But current field here inside of our definition is, in fact, what we want it to use. So I'm setting up my HTML to be useful here. So when I do copy it, for example, it's broken here because it has no context to my list. But when I bring it over to my list and I preview it, now it works, right? Because it does have that context to the current field in which I'm placing that list formatting definition. So you could always continue to just write your definition using hard-coded values until you get to the final piece where you want to replace the hard-coded value with a dynamic value and then replace it at that point. But you may be okay knowing, well, okay, I know it's going to be a broken image, but I'm going to go ahead and keep using that. Of course, it makes it hard to actually see the styles that you're using, right? So if you were to write something in there, for example, let me take this, and I'm going to paste it in. What I've done is I've added a bunch of inline styling here that does all the work that we need it to do, right? But if I hit run, while it did update my schema appropriately, you see that it translated all those inline styles here appropriately into the format that it needs to be in the JSON, I still can't accurately see that it's working. But if I come in and I just replace the SRC field here with a direct hard-coded value, and I hit run, something must not be right there. It should be showing the final version, although it's not. It's doing some weird things. But the point is that you could continue to do that if you wanted to. And now I've done that. I hit preview. Well, we're only halfway there. That's why we're only halfway there. I didn't add all the additional stuff that I needed. There's more needed on the div, right? So I could come in here and I'm going to go all the way down to what I need it to be in the final version of this. And so I'm going to come over to my formatter. I'm going to hit this. I'm going to hit that. And for my image, I am still going to go ahead and replace it with the hard-coded values so that as you iterate through, let me do that right there, make it less dynamic, and I'm going to hit run. Well, now we see a true preview, right? So now it's applying all of that, and we can see that it's added all of the nestation as well, because I've added another layer of div here and here around the image with its own styling required, right? So it's pretty cool. Now you could also add it to the CSS box, right? So I absolutely could have given a class name to this. I can come in here and say class equals image, or yeah, class image field. And then I could come over here and say image field, right? And instead of putting that all in line, I could add it there if I'm more comfortable, and I'll remove it from inline. Do that, and we'll hit run. And ideally, really nothing changed in the output. We wouldn't expect it to, right? But we do see what it did is it added that class name there for us on our field, but it still applied the styles accurately, right? So if I were to just remove that and hit run, then we see it's applying the inline styles from up here, but it's not doing the rest of the styling we need to condense it all down. And so I've done that, I hit run, and now it looks right. And I could always move these into, right? I could give that div a class name and add that over here. If I just want this to be pure HTML, then we're fine. And I can do that, and then I can copy that over to include what I need. So I'm going to replace that SRC here, that, and of course that's going to break here, a broken image, right? But if I copy that information and then come over here and paste it, now we see it's done everything we need. So it's the beauty of being able to kind of just write in HTML, write in CSS, have it converted for you and test it along the way. It's a great learning tool as well. Again, the reason I like using the hard-coded values at first is because you can actually see the true output from beginning to end here, instead of having to kind of copy and paste back and forth between this and your list formatting definition there on the page. But what if you wanted to do kind of both? You wanted the best of both worlds. We're going to show you that. In a few minutes, but I am now going to hand it back to April, where she's going to cover some Power Apps.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Yeah, so for the PowerApps side of thing, I showed Power Automate and how we can integrate a flow. I'm going to show the same thing and how we can integrate and open up a PowerApps application inside of our SharePoint list with column formatting again. And again, why would we want to do this? Well, there's a few use cases. So for this example of the event itinerary, this is a good way to kind of see what's going on and probably a really good way to enter data about what the events are coming up. But we might not be this to have the way that users actually interact with the application, right? We might want to have maybe an Ignite-like experience for end users to be able to browse what sessions we have coming up in the event, rather than having to go to the SharePoint list directly. So in this case, you might have built a Power App like what we're seeing here to be able to have that information in there and browse the sessions, and maybe you're building even more advanced functionality. So the Power App itself is using the SharePoint list that we look at, the event itinerary, to be able to browse the data and surface that up. But if I look into it, I can see additional information that I'm pulling in as well, and have this whole RSVP function where I can RSVP for an event, and it goes into my schedule of sessions like I have a true Ignite experience. So if you have a case like this where you're really just mainly wanting to use the SharePoint list as a database in a way to enter the data rather than being the primary way that you would browse the data, you might run into a case where rather than when you click on the item in the SharePoint list, have it open up this form, you might instead want to be able to click on a column and have it open up this screen on the Power App where it has the details about the session that you have, so that you can kind of force users to use the Power App approach to be able to see the information. So in that case, form formatting or column formatting in this case will come in handy here. So let's take a look at how we can do this. Now the JSON for this is extremely simple. So we take a look at what's going on here. All we're doing is we're going to transform the column that we're applying this to, and we're going to make it a hyperlink. And the hyperlink is going to open up our Power App. So the only thing for this sample, which is again out on the PNV repo, that you have to change is what is here in this href section. And the only thing that we're doing different is we're copying. I'll show you how to get the GUID of the Power App. But what we're doing is we're going to pass in a query string parameter to the app. So there's a little bit of stuff that has to go on the Power App side to be able to read a query string that we pass in. So we're going to pass in the ID that we select from the SharePoint list. The Power App can read that ID and then take us directly to the detail screen about that record. So to do that, we're going to add this ampersand and whatever you want your query string parameter to be, and then equals. And we're going to dynamically pull in the ID of the selected item using a plus sign and this little $sign ID, which is the name of the column. So that's all we have to do from the JSON side of things. I'm going to go ahead and copy this while I'm in here. And the only other thing we have to do is get the URL of the Power App. So to do that, I'm going to show you, you're going to go to make.powerapps.com. We're going to click the three dots next to the app that you want to get the URL for, and we're going to go to details. And you just want to copy this web link here, and that's what you'll paste into your JSON code. Now from that point, the only other thing we have to do is edit your Power App itself. So if I open up my Power App in edit mode, the thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into the app section right here on the left-hand side. And we have a property here, and this is new. So if you, so word to the wise, if you Google or Bing how to do this, you might see people referencing, even myself in older videos, to use this onStart property. Well, there is a new property rolled out where we don't want to use onStart anymore. We want to use this property called start screen. So what we can do is in the start screen property, we can check for a parameter using this function called param. So we can say if a parameter of session ID exists, if that's not blank, using the is blank function, then take me to a screen in my application called session details, which has the individual item details. Otherwise, put me here on this default screen called session scheduler, where a user can just browse the different sessions and add them to your schedule like I showed you earlier. So that's all there is to it from the Power App side to get it to work. So I'm going to check for that parameter that we're passing in from our column formatting. I'm going to dynamically switch the screen to show. And then on the detail screen, the only other piece is referencing the selected session, doing a lookup there to find whatever the selected session is. and then we're going to display that. So tying this all together, just to show you what this would look like, we're going to go back to this event itinerary list. And just to keep it simple, I'm going to reuse this session code field. And we're going to apply the column formatting there by going to the dropdown, going to format this column in advanced. Going to replace what's in there, paste or sample. And you see when we did that, it also added a little kind of open button so that the user knows that this is going to open up an item. So now if I click on one of these sessions, like this best practice for internet buildouts, or how about this David session for mastering list formatting, now you see that here's our query string that it passed in. There's our session ID, and it passed in the ID of the item, which is 6. And now it took me directly to the screen where I can see all of the details about David's session. I can even see an evaluation, related sessions, I can RSVP, and add that there onto my schedule for the event. So pretty simple example. And then you can tell again, I didn't change anything with the app. So if I were to load this app as normal, not with an ID passed, it takes me to the screen. So that parameter that we have is working. So another great example of how we can integrate list formatting. This is really great too if you want to put these web parts with your formatting applied on the page and be able to have linked to a Power App that way. So many possibilities with using column formatting to open up a Power App. All right, we're getting close to the end here, I know, so I'm going to turn it back over to David. I don't know what we have time for, but possibly maybe some VS Code for JSON, or we'll see.
Yes, we will do this in ludicrous speed. We wanted to jam pack as much in possible for you, so you can use. I had mentioned if you're comfortable in the code space and you want to use VS Code for that, which again, if that's new to you, but you're getting your feet wet in list formatting, that's a great way to start. There is a component that is a browser component and a list formatting, or excuse me, a VS Code extension called SP Formatter from an awesome community contributor, Sergey Sergeyev. You need to install it in both, and it will allow you to edit in VS Code while it is actually updating live in your list. So I'm not going to get too deep into everything now in terms of how to install it. You install those two things. We'll give you some links, but I'm going to show you how I can just set that up real quick. I've already got the extension or the plugin installed in my browser, so I'm going to turn that on. And you can see down here, it changed in my Twitter format column. That's what we're going to try to change here is the Twitter. And I'm going to say turned on. Now, I also need to install it over here. It's a VS Code extension. I've already got it installed. And so I'm in an empty JSON file, and I want to start it up. So I'm going to say SP Formatter start new session. Right now, I've done that. And you can kind of see down here at the bottom, it says SP Formatter listening. Right, which is pretty cool. So what I do is I come back over here and I just refresh my list formatting. I come back over to my column, format this column. I go to advanced. And we see that it's turned on and it's telling me that it's connected, right? It's connected to that file. And that's the file that I'm editing, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up one where I have that list formatting definition already written out. Just copy it, make it easy. And I'm going to paste it over here. And as I'm editing and I paste that into my VS Code, I didn't even have to save, and look what happened. It automatically added the VS or the JSON here, and it formatted it. And so I can make changes here on the fly if I wanted to be able to take advantage of that being occurring live in living color, if you will, immediately on my screen. So super advanced feature, very, very powerful. It's great for, just making the development and the process and making it iterative as you're doing that development. All right, now we are out of time, so we're just going to go over some resources just real briefly. There is a huge number of community samples by amazing community contributors. The list formatting samples boggle my mind. Tetsia, who is on the call now, one of the most profound contributors for list formatting I've ever seen. So many there. Guess what? They're all free. So take advantage of them. Column formatting, view formatting, it's all there. If you'd like to learn more, join the Patterns and Practices Special Interest Development Call. It's every other Thursday. Chris Kint, April Dunnam, and myself will be presenting on it here soon. They get a lot of list formatting demos being done and a lot of powerful features for you to take advantage of. But with that, we want to thank you. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. We hope you guys are all, guys and gals, are enjoying your day. And really thank you for taking the time out to join us in this session.
Thanks, everyone.